Welcome back. After the midterms, both political parties taking a look at the future, deciding who they want to call the shots for the GOP. There have been calls to replace the incumbent head of the party, Ronna McDaniel. My guest tonight has an idea of who should replace her. He's Kenny Cody. He's a conservative writer and activist. You may see his work in places like Newsmax, Town Hall, and the Washington Examiner. Also the head of the Cott County GOP down there in Eastern Tennessee. Kenny, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Jim, for having me on, man. It's an honor to be on. Glad to voice my opinion in the great state nation capital of Washington, D.C.
Let's talk about this. So there you go. You're outside of Knoxville, right?
Yes, I am.
As you watched all the races and watched everything play out in the midterms this year, what stood out to you as somebody who has worked in Republican circles, in Tennessee? What happened? What went right? What went wrong for your party?
We didn't have a unified message, and I think that's the most obvious outlier of the midterm elections. I mean, we were expected to flip the Senate. We were expected to have a 30-seat majority in the House. We were expected to pick up 50 seats, and we're going to end up with just a +9 majority in the House of Representatives. But I think two people really who stood out in the midterm elections were Ron DeSantis and Lee Zeldin. And because DeSantis got elected to the governorship in Florida, and Lee Zeldin gave up his congressional spot, I think somebody that we can look to lead the party forward would be somebody like Lee Zeldin. He gave up his congressional seat to run for governor. He's not going to return to Congress in 2023. So I think he would be somebody who had a unified message for the New York GOP that took people over in swing districts, to people over in county and citywide races. And I think he'd be an excellent blueprint for the future of the Republican Party.
For people who don't know, Lee Zeldin, again, as you mentioned, is a congressman who served part of Long Island. He challenged Governor Kathy Hochul. She won in that race. Zeldin won with the endorsement of former President Trump. He ran on a message about fighting crime in New York State, which resonated with many people out there. He certainly got more attention than other gubernatorial candidates did in the past. I'm curious from your perspective, because it seems like right now, as we look at 2024, everybody's looking at this as a possible face-off between Ron DeSantis, who has not announced he's going to run for president, and former President Trump, who has. Does the former president's presence in this race, does that change the calculus for how you look at this? Does he have a space in the Republican Party of the future here?
I think he does. I mean, here's my thing, is I think that people look to his record, especially in 2018 and 2022, as some sort of knock on the president, and I understand why. But this is the issue with having polarizing and cult of personality candidates at the top of the ticket. Look at 2016 and 2020. In 2016, the GOP took back the House, the Senate, and the presidency. In 2020, even though he lost the presidency and we ended up losing the runoff elections for the Senate, in the House, we made substantial gains in the overwhelming majority that the Democrats had in 2018. We made increases in minorities and Asians, in blacks, in Hispanics, and in women in 2020. But in 2018 and 2022, when we don't have that person at the top of the ticket that has endorsed all these candidates, people are driving out to vote for the cult of personality. They drove out to vote for Barack Obama, but they didn't drive out to vote for his endorsed candidates in 2010. So I think that the GOP and the Democrats both, that's why they kind of struggled in finding the replacement for Barack Obama. I think both parties have this problem with replacing and motivating their voters when a cult of personality is not at the top of the ticket. I don't think Trump is necessarily a problem for the GOP. It's just when you have so much reliability on as much as an energized and polarizing candidate as Trump can be, he definitely drives out the votes, but when he's not at the top of the ticket, you suffer a little bit because his people are running on him without him being on the same ticket.
And for people, by the way, who just heard what you said there, you don't think that Trump would be a problem. I want to point something out, too, because we're looking at this from a D.C. perspective. I was back in Pennsylvania for Thanksgiving, and there are still many people out there in areas that went for Donald Trump that did not turn out for Republicans in the past that still want him to run in 2024 and believe in his message. Kenny, I'm just about out of time. Real quick, one other name that's been bandied about, Mike Lindell says he's going to run for GOP chair.
Nothing offense towards Michael Lindell. I think he's been, he's a great man who came back from a very, a pretty much tumultuous past, and I think he has some really good points. But somebody like Lindell doesn't have the grassroots organization and the grassroots support, at least to me, to lead the party. And I think somebody like Zeldin does, who has had this experience in the RNC, has had experience with the GOP, being a congressional member, and now running basically as the New York GOP chairman himself. I mean, I know he's technically not, but the party followed after him. And while I like Lindell fine, and he's all fine and good, I think Zeldin's the pick far over Lindell to challenge McDaniel.
Would it help too that you didn't have somebody who would talk about election fraud at every turn? Lee Zeldin certainly isn't doing that.
Yeah, I mean, I think the issue is it's 2 years ago. I mean, I think there is election integrity issues across the country. I mean, even people that I've talked to here in Tennessee, election commissioners in counties have addressed that as a problem with universal mail-in ballots and things like that. But I think people are far more concerned with inflation, with crime, with immigration than they are about stolen elections. And election integrity is a very important priority, and that's something we need to talk about. But going back 2 years ago and talking about it's just not going to help us win elections.
Kenny Cody, I appreciate it. I'm going to tweet out a link to what you wrote in the Washington Examiner about Lee Zeldin. Thanks for joining me tonight.
Thank you so much, Jim. I appreciate it.